Hello and welcome to the Ciao Bella Midnight Spell mini album tutorial series designed for Scrap and Create. All of the products that are available on the Scrap and Create website are linked in the description box below, so you can click on those links, purchase those products to follow along. Let's get started. In this tutorial, we are going to start building up page 4. So I have my 8x8 paper that is the inspiration for the front of page 4. I'm going to feature this image here, so I've just cut this to 6 1/4. Remember, you don't need to worry about this paper for right now, just showing you my design process. Eventually, I will end up cutting this as well so that the bottom part of this will be on a separate piece and I will have a ribbon closure. So let's go ahead and start building the page. For the first piece, we'll need to cut this to 6 1/2 by 7 1/2. Now on the 7 1/2 inch side, we're going to score this at 1/2 inch along the top edge, then use scissors to miter the ends of that 1/2 inch tab. We're going to need 2 pieces that measure 3 3/4 by 4 1/2. On the first piece, we're going to score on the 3 3/4 inch side at 1/2 inch on the left side. On the second piece, on the 3 3/4 inch side, we're going to score at 1/2 inch on the right side. Then for each of these pieces, we are going to miter the ends on that 1/2 inch tab. I have one piece that measures 6 1/2 by 2 inches. On the 2 inch side, I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch along the bottom edge. Then I'm going to use my scissors to cut the ends on that 1/2 inch tab. Next, I have a piece that measures 6 1/2 by 4 inches. On the 4 inch side, I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch on the bottom, then use my scissors to miter those corners on that 1/2 inch tab. The last piece I'm going to cut is 4 1/2 by 5 1/2, no scoring needed for this piece. Next, I'm going to take my bone folder and burnish all of the score lines on these pieces. Then I'll come back and we will assemble the page. I'll be starting with my large 6 1/2 by 7 1/2 inch flap. First, we're going to apply the adhesive to the 1/2 inch tab. I have my centering ruler here in the center. I've also marked this. I'm going to place this in the center, so that's 3 1/4 inches from the center, and placing that score line against the top edge of the paper, and then burnish this down. Take both of your small flaps that are 3 3/4 by 4 1/2. For right now, it doesn't matter where they are placed up and down on the flap. We just need to make sure that they will fit on here without overlapping. Now mine are a little large, and this happens based on your score lines and your cuts, and that's okay. I'm going to bring in my paper trimmer and just take one of these, and I'm just going to cut off a little teeny tiny sliver. You can also use your scissors to do this if you want. It's not a lot of paper that I'm taking off, so just a little bit, because I want these to meet in the middle without there being any overlap. So now mine look good. I'm going to go over here on both sides and I'm going to mark these in the center. And then I'm going to come back and place these on the page. I've marked 2 1/4 inches from the center on both sides. I've got my adhesive on my first flap. It doesn't matter which one you place on first, but I'm just going to line up that score line with the edge of the page and use my little marks as a guide, and then burnish this one down. Now I'm going to apply my adhesive to the back of my second piece, and I'm going to line up the score line with the edge of my page, but I'm also going to use the first flap to place my second flap. So I want to make sure that the top and the bottoms are straight and that it does meet in the middle. And once I get that into position, I can go ahead and adhere this down. So once you are finished, you should have your pieces lined up in all those places. I'll be starting with my 6.5 by 4 inch piece. I did mark on the bottom edge 3¼ inches from center on both sides, and I'm going to be using my upper flap as a guide for this one as well. So first I'm going to apply my adhesive, and then I'm going to place this down so that the score line is lined up with the edge of the page. But before I press it down fully, I want to make sure that, excuse my head for a moment, I need to make sure that this is straight with the upper flap on the sides. Then I will burnish this down. Once this flap is on, I'm going to take my smaller flap and apply my adhesive here. And then this one, I'm going to adhere to the bottom edge of that flap, and it's going to create a small tuck spot eventually. I'm going to do this upside down just because it's a little easier for me to do on camera. And I'm going to line up those bottom edges, and that should also line up both sides. Once it's on the page, we'll go ahead and adhere this down. And then I'm going to put my P here because that will be turned into a pocket. Then this final piece is going to be a photo mat for this pocket, and it can go either orientation, so we can decide that later when we are decorating the page. So this is all for the front. Next we'll come to the back and we'll start building the back side. This is the 8 by 8 paper that I'm going to be using for the back of page 4. So I've just cut it to 4.5 inches because I want to focus mostly on this image. Again, don't worry about this paper, just to show you how I'm designing this. So let's go ahead and make these pieces. The first piece needs to be cut to 4¼ by 7¾ On the 4¼ inch side, we are going to score this at 1/2 inch on the left-hand side. Then we'll use scissors on that 1/2 inch tab section to miter both ends. Next, I have a piece that's just slightly under 3¾ by 3 inches. I've already scored this one, so I've scored this at 3 inches on the 1/2 inch along the bottom, and then I've mitered the corners on the ends of that 1/2 inch tab. Then I've cut a piece to 2.5 by 7.5, and I don't need to score this piece. For the next piece, cut to 5¼ by 7¾ On the 5¼ inch side, we're going to score this at 1/2 inch on the right-hand side, and then use scissors to miter the ends on the 1/2 inch tab. I have a piece that measures 4¾ by 5¼ On the 4¾ inch side, I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch. Then I'm going to miter those ends on that 1/2 inch tab. I have one piece that measures 8 inches by 2 inches. On the 8 inch side, I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch and 7.5 inches. Then I'll take my scissors and miter the ends of the 1/2 inch tab sections. For the last piece, it's cut to 8.5 by 6¼ On the 8.5 inch side, I'm going to score this at 4¼ inches. Next, I'm going to fold on all these score lines and burnish with my bone folder. Now we're going to start assembling the page, starting with 4 1/4 by 7 3/4 inch piece. I'm going to place my adhesive on my 1/2 inch tab section. This piece is going to go on the left-hand side. You can measure this if you want to. I'm just going to eye it because it's about 1/8 of an inch on each side, so I think I can handle that and getting it pretty straight. So I'm going to line up the score line with the edge of the page and then burnish this down so it is on the left-hand side. I'm going to take my little 3 3/4 by 3 inch piece and set it down here first and make sure that my flap will close and this does not stick out here past the edge. Now my piece is okay. If yours is too large, go ahead and trim just a little bit off of the edge of your piece until it will fit without sticking over the edge. Or you can glue it on first and then you can use your scissors or craft knife to cut it if you want to. Once you have it the right size, you're going to place your adhesive on your 1/2 inch tab. You're going to line up that bottom edge with the score line with the bottom edge of the page and then burnish this down. This will eventually become a pocket, so I'm going to put my P there to remind me. And then the next piece, the 2 1/2 by 7 1/2 inch piece, is going to be a journaling card, or it can be a place for small 2 by 2 photo mats, I guess, as well. But I'm going to place that there. Then we'll come to the larger 5 1/4 by 7 3/4 inch flap. So first we're going to place our adhesive on that 1/2 inch tab section. Then I'm going to place this piece on the right hand side, but making sure that it lines up with the top and bottom edge of the flap that I've already put on the page. Once I have it into position, I can go ahead and use my bone folder to burnish it down. Taking my 4 3/4 by 5 1/4 inch piece, I am going to apply my adhesive to my 1/2 inch tab section and use my centering ruler here. I did already mark this 2 5/8 of an inch up and down from the edge, so I'm going to move my ruler. I'm going to place this score line right at the edge of the page, or right at the edge of the flap, I should say, so that score line is lined up with the edge of the flap. And then I will adhere this down. For my 8 inch by 2 inch piece, this is going to be a belly band here, but I need to make sure that it's going to fit on the page with everything closed. So I'm going to place it on the page and start closing these flaps. Now, hopefully you can see that it is too big, so it's going to push up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my scoreboard and I'm going to rescore this so that it's just a little bit smaller. I'm going to use the line on my scoreboard. I just used a Sharpie marker, a fine point Sharpie, and drew down that 6 in the center of my board, and I use it for different things when I'm trying to line stuff up, but it's also good for things like this. So I can just make this a little tiny bit smaller, and I may have to do this a couple of times. You can cut your piece so that it's 7 7/8 of an inch if you don't want to have to rescore it. If you do that, it'll just be slightly smaller, but it will definitely fit. So mine fits now that I've rescored it. I will go ahead and adhere this into the center. So I'm going to first mark the center. And now that I have my centers marked, I'll go ahead and apply my adhesive to my 1/2 inch tabs on both sides of my belly band. And then I'm going to use those marks to line everything up. making sure that I don't have this in my score line on either side. So as soon as I put it on there, I am going to close both of these to make sure it still closes, everything is good, and then I will burnish this down. Then the final piece, that 8.5 by 6.25 inch piece, I've folded this into a card or a booklet, and that is going to go here underneath my belly band. Then I will close this smaller flap first and the larger flap second, and this is where Cinderella and Prince Charming, that image from the papers that I showed you, is going to go. Now here, I think I'm probably going to do a magnetic closure, so I'm going to put an M there. I might change that to ribbon, we don't know yet, but the idea is I think that's going to be a magnet. So that's it for page 4. We are complete with our build. That's the end of this tutorial. So if you're just joining the tutorial series, all of the products that are available on the Scrap and Create website, from the Ciao Bella Magic Spell collection and the other embellishments that I'm using, everything is linked in the description box below, so you can click on those links, purchase those products, and follow along. Now in the next set of tutorials, we will begin using those decorative papers, so you want to make sure you have all of your supplies ready to go. I'll see you in the next tutorial.